Homa Bay County, Visions Kids School from Igembe Central Constituency, Meru County, and Excel Academy from Tabaj Constituency in Wajir County. You are welcome to the National Assembly. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, let me begin by thanking the Chair.
What is out of order, Honorable Kaluma?
Speaker, I seldom stop the Majority Leader, but Speaker, schools have been mentioned. One of them is my school, which is a school I've really fought hard in establishing. Uganda Mixed Secondary School is in Parliament because they have won in the national music competition in Nyeri under their category. So they are here to celebrate with the National Assembly that award together with other institutions. In fact, they are led by my best principal, Madam Linet Olonde, and all the teachers together. Allow me, Honorable Speaker, to welcome all of them together with all learning institutions to the House of Parliament during this learning tour. I thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I thank the Majority Leader.
Well, that is in order. Congratulations to Ogade Mixed Secondary School from Homa Bay constituency in Homa Bay County. Leader of Majority, you may proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And let me also join the Honorable Kaluma to take my seat to allow him to, I guess he wanted to welcome his students in the school, that school from Homa Bay and also the one from Igembe and the other school from Tabaj in Wajir County. I also take this opportunity to welcome them to the National Assembly. Honorable Speaker, I rise to second this bill, and I was saying let me begin by thanking the Chair of JLAC and the Chair of Finance Committee in absentia, who were led the two committees in considering this bill when it came to the House for consideration. Honorable Speaker, as the Chair has ably moved, and let me thank him, I was seated in my office attending to other matters when you called me out to move, but I knew the Honorable Murugara was in hand. We had agreed if I am late in the office, he can move for me and I'll second for him. And if I moved, he would second for me, because this bill, him and his committee and that of finance were able to look at it. And Honorable Speaker, as he has said, this bill seeks to attend to gaps, legal gaps in our Anti-Money Laundering Act, our Counter-Terrorism Financing Act, and these are the two acts of Parliament, Honorable Speaker, that we passed. One in 2009, the Proceedings of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act that we passed in 2009, and December 2009, and came into operation in 2010, June, together with the Prevention of Terrorism Act that again was enacted in 2012, October of 2012. These two acts, Honorable Speaker, are the architecture around the financing of terrorism and how we counter money laundering and proceeds of crime in this country. And Honorable Speaker, Kenya is amongst the League of Nations that are member states of the Financial Action Task Force, which is a global body that is mandated to set global standards to promote the effective implementation of legal, regulatory, and operational measures to combat money laundering, terrorism financing, and even the financing of against the proliferation of small arms and weapons of mass destruction. Honorable Speaker, this task force is charged with that responsibility to ensure that the global financial system is secure and criminals do not use our financial systems to launder money that is proceeds of crime or that is going to finance the production or mass distribution of weapons of mass destruction or even financing terrorism. Honorable Speaker, it also speaks to people who launder money, corruption money. And in a country like ours and many other African states, Honorable Speaker, a lot has been said about fighting corruption, Honorable Speaker. And we have always said that you cannot fight corruption by just speaking without action. And part of the action, Honorable Speaker, is to ensure that states and governments are able to follow up proceeds of crime like corruption right to where those who obtain money corruptly from public coffers take their money. And whether you move your money from a country like Kenya to the United States, to South Africa, to Dubai, that the financial system globally is able to track this money and ensure that proceeds of crime, whether it's corruption, whether it's money, whether it's drug trafficking, whether it's the proliferation of arms, or even terrorism financing, there is no safe haven anywhere in the world for proceeds of crime, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, there are gaps that this task force usually identifies through their peer reviews. And Kenya, again, has been subjected to these peer reviews. And over time, Honorable Speaker, I think is in the year 2021, 2022, is the last time that Kenya went through its second anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing mutual evaluation, which, as I said, is a peer review among states in Eastern, Southern Africa that have a body that they call the Eastern and Southern Africa Anti-Money Laundering Group, or SAAMLG. And this regional anti-money laundering body, Honorable Speaker, conducts a peer review amongst the member states. And Kenya, being a member state of this body, had our peer review done in the year 2022. And there are certain gaps that were identified, Honorable Speaker. And it is those gaps that this bill now seeks to address. Honorable Speaker, if you allow me just to go through some of those gaps that were identified, or the deficiencies that were picked up during the mutual evaluation report for Kenya. And indeed, they identified certain major deficiencies that need to be addressed through legal reforms, and it is those deficiencies that this bill now seeks to address. Honorable Speaker, the first item was that proceeds of crime and anti-money laundering, the POCAMLA Act, or the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act, only contains anti-money laundering requirements and does not cover the combating of terrorism financing. Therefore, there's a gap where we have a law that deals with only issues to do with anti-money laundering, but does not adequately cover the counter-terrorism financing or combating of terrorism financing. And therefore, in a region like ours where we have had incidents of terrorism, it becomes very crucial that we have measures, adequate legal safeguards to ensure that we're also combating terrorism financing. And those are some of the issues that the chair was mentioning that this bill now seeks to address. It also identified that Kenya does not have a range of proportionate and dissuasive civil and administrative sanctions for dealing with natural or legal persons that fail to comply with anti-money laundering or combating the financing of terrorism requirements, or non-compliance with AML or the CFT obligations. AML being the anti-money laundering and CFT being the combating of terrorism financing. And Honorable Speaker, if you don't have a range of proportionate and dissuasive civil and administrative sanctions against companies, because those are the items that are referred to as natural and legal persons. Legal persons being legal persons like companies. If you don't have adequate sanctions in our laws, then it means somebody can steal money, launder that money through companies that cannot be sanctioned. And therefore, this bill is seeking to have adequate sanctions both of natural persons and even legal entities like registered companies, whether they are limited or non-limited companies, Honorable Speaker. It was also noted, Honorable Speaker, that there are no provisions which makes money laundering and terrorism financing as extraditable offenses. And therefore, you can commit a crime on counter-terrorism financing or combating terrorism financing in Kenya. You could
meet Stephen. He's a certified accountant. QuickBooks Online Accountant helps Stephen manage and
and you take off to another country, but because it is not classified, those crimes are not classified as extraditable offenses, then you find people who have stolen from this country. And there are case examples, Honorable Speaker. If you remember the owners of companies like Triton, when they cleaned off money from this country through the Triton energy scandal, those people were able to get out of this country and live happily thereafter in other countries. But now, having laundered money out of this country, and there are many other examples that you could cite, where people have stolen money, obtained money corruptly in this country, but because the crimes of money laundering and combating terrorism financing are not classified as extraditable offenses, then you are not able to extradite those people back to this country to be charged. Yet we have seen in other jurisdictions, like the case example of the former MD of KPLC and former energy minister, being sought in the British Islands to be charged on crimes that relate to obtaining money through corruption. But we could not do the same for us. Now, with this new bill, we'll be able to classify crimes around money laundering and combating of terrorism financing as extraditable offenses and be able to extradite people who commit such crimes in this country. Honorable Speaker, there was also a legal gap in the country, in Kenya, in relation to terrorism financing, and this is impeding the country's efforts to fighting terrorism financing. This legal gap in relation to terrorism financing is also impacting the terrorism financing preventative measures. And as I said, Honorable Speaker, with the threats around Al-Shabaab in northern Kenya and other parts of the country, like in Lamu and other parts where, even in Nairobi, Honorable Speaker, we have been victims of terrorism. And if you are not able to have adequate legal safeguards to ensure that those who finance terrorism can be apprehended and charged, we have seen people being charged and easily walk out of court having been accused of financing terrorism and having maimed and killed Kenyans. I think with the passage of this bill, Honorable Speaker, again, this will be a thing of the past. We will now be able to track money, whether it is money from piracy, whether it is money that has come from organizations that are financing terrorism. You'll be able to track all that money and be able to arrest and charge before courts of law people who are in any way involved in the financing of terrorism in this country or even elsewhere, therefore making our country not a safe haven, but a very unsafe place for terrorists and those who finance the terrorists. Honorable Speaker, it was also noted during this peer review that the country does not have mechanisms for simplified mutual legal assistance or simplified extradition, and those are the issues Honorable Murugara was speaking to, including the issues that he spoke to that were challenged in court by the Law Society of Kenya and other bodies, which, as the chair has ably stated, following an out-of-court settlement between the Law Society of Kenya, the Office of the Attorney General, that has now been settled, and this is why we have this law now here. Honorable Speaker, the other gap was around virtual assets and virtual asset service providers that are not limited, and the country has not put in place regulatory frameworks around the virtual asset service providers. And therefore, if all these virtual asset service providers, Honorable Speaker, are not covered under our laws, and we have a live case today, which I'm happy the member who has just walked in, Honorable Irene Mayaka, is among the members who have been nominated by the ICT committee, together with the chair, ICT, to deal with these virtual asset providers. I hear someone saying there is no ICT, whether you call it ICT or CIIT or CII. There is a committee that the chair is the Honorable KJ. And I was saying, without the virtual asset service providers having a clear framework on how they will be dealt with, these are the cases of WorldCoin, and that's why I'm saying we have a live case today where these virtual asset providers are not prohibited, and the country has not put in place a regulatory framework that will deal with all these VASPs. Thank you, whoever served me the water.
Yeah, I can give you an opportunity to appreciate her. I watched her kindness.
That must be Honorable Jamatia, the member for Baringo. And you know, ladies from Baringo are usually very good people. And you can see she noticed that I was struggling, my throat was getting dry. And thank you, Honorable Jamatia, the very able county MP for Baringo County, and a future governor, future first female governor of Baringo County. That tells Irene Mayaka, next time maybe if you offer the water. But I was saying, as Irene Mayaka was walking in, we need now to have a framework to deal with those virtual asset service providers. That is why you saw it being very easy for people like WorldCoin and other cryptocurrency service providers having a safe haven in Kenya. And because many of them know that the laws that are there on anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing are not strong enough. But now with the enactment of this bill, and when it becomes an act of parliament, we will have a clear framework, regulatory framework that will ensure that nobody ever takes advantage of Kenyans, even for these virtual assets. And nobody can use these virtual assets, because it's also probable that people can use the virtual assets to finance terrorism or even to launder money. So we make it very difficult with this law now for anybody from anywhere around the world to use virtual assets to launder money or to finance terrorism or to actually clean money that has come from criminal activities. During this peer review, Honorable Speaker, it was also noted that the Prevention of Terrorism Act does not have provisions for sanctioning legal persons, and that's why I said with the amendments in this bill, because this is almost like an omnibus bill, because it's amending both the Terrorism and AML Acts of Parliament, we will now have a provision that can actually sanction legal persons, including companies, trust funds, foundations. We have seen, Honorable Speaker, in the past, people obtaining money through corruption, others through criminal activities. And all they do is register trust funds, put the money in a trust fund, or register a foundation. And you have seen even politicians, Honorable Speaker, who run foundations. They are saying they are here. And I am not talking about anyone who is here, so don't feel afraid if you are here. I am speaking about politicians who have registered foundations in their names. And these foundations are ordinarily avenues for money laundering. People loot from public coffers and hide money in trust funds, in foundations, some with very appealing names and very appealing characters of the good work they are doing in service to the people, educating children, dealing with widows and widowers and orphans. But you will find someone who is running a foundation, I don't want to name names, but they are known. And Kenyans know the politicians who have foundations in their names, claiming to be educating vulnerable children or even assisting certain sectors of our health sector, but they are basically avenues for laundering corrupt money. We will make it a thing of the past and impossible for now politicians to use public office to obtain money from public coffers, register a foundation or a trust, then launder money that you stole from public coffers in the pretext that you're offering public goods or public services to vulnerable people. It will now be very difficult, Honorable Zamzam, because I saw Honorable Zamzam getting very attentive when I mentioned politicians, and she's among the politicians who are saying, don't mention them. And I'm not mentioning any by name, Honorable Zamzam, so relax. And I know the time you have been here as member for Mombasa, you have distinguished yourself as a good leader.
The Honorable Zamzam has already put a point of order. What is out of order, Honorable Zamzam? Is it because
Mheshimiwa Spika, ningependa kumwelezea kiongozi wa wengi kuwa asiwe anafanya ile blanket blame, kwa sababu pengine kuna wengine, mimi sina,
ningependa
sina
kumwelezea
mheshimiwa,
kiongozi wa wengi
wengine
kuwa
pengine watakuchukulia
asiwe
vingine, pengine
anafanya
they're
ile
very
blanket
straightforward.
blame, kwa sababu
Kwa hiyo
pengine
ukisema
kuna wengine, mimi
politicians
sina,
tunafunga
ningependa
kama
kumwelezea
wengine wako upande
kiongozi wa
huu,
wengi
wengine
kuwa
wajua, lakini pengine wako sawa. So sema
asiwe
wale ambao
anafanya ile
pengine wanatumia pesa ya umma kuingiza kule, na pengine kama unawajua wataje, do not blanket blame watu wote ukaweka katika kikapo kimoja. Wajua unaheshimika sana, kiongozi wa wengi, na maneno ambayo yanatoka kwenye mdomo wako yanachukuliwa na uzito sana, isije ukatoka pale mlangoni ukapigwa ngwala. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Speaker.
Well, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Sikujua hiyo kupigwa ngwana ni nini. But Honorable Speaker, you know, Honorable Zamza may not know, I am also very cautious what I say, so I will not name names. But we know political leaders who have foundations, who have trust funds, many, and you can Google those who have foundations in their names. And some have even been accused and charged in court. And it's in the public domain that there are politicians who have held public offices and have looted from public coffers, laundered the money through foundations and trust funds, yet they claim to be offering scholarships to students. And you find a politician who is giving 3 scholarships to students in a year and claims that that is the work of that foundation, yet they use that foundation to launder money from, that was stolen from public coffers. I therefore will not be naming any names, as much as I know you know them and they are known, and I need not name any names. Honorable Speaker, the other thing that was noted during this peer review that is being addressed in this bill is that supervisory authorities are not implementing risk-based supervision across the board. And this bill now seeks to ensure that all supervisory authorities implement risk-based supervision. And risk-based supervision, Honorable Speaker, is, for instance, our lawyers, members of the legal profession, who are dealing with clients from all walks of life. And they will be able to analyze your whole clientele of lawyers, or sorry, of clients as a lawyer, and be able to know this is a person who is in public office, this is how much they earn, this is how much money is entrusted to them in that public office. And therefore, if they are coming to conduct transactions or dealings in your law firm that could trigger you to report to your supervisory authority like the Law Society of Kenya or other supervisory authorities, then they will have a framework that they can be able now to report to their supervisory authorities, and therefore based on the risk levels of whoever you're supervising. And this is more so, especially with our professional bodies, the Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the Law Society of Kenya, the Association of Bankers, the Association of Insurers in this country, because they all have information that they can be able to help in countering terrorism and anti-money laundering. Honorable Speaker, therefore the bill seeks to provide the following. It will provide supervision and enforcement, cross-border declaration of monetary instruments, reporting suspicious transactions, reporting of cash transactions, raise the cash transaction reporting threshold from USD 10,000 to USD $15,000. It will also enhance the transparency on beneficial ownership, because again, you know, Honorable Speaker, a lot of people have hidden behind companies where we are never able to lift the veil and know who are the beneficial owners of certain companies registered in this country and even outside the country. Therefore, the bill will seek to enhance transparency around the issue of beneficial ownership. We also help in combating terrorism financing, combating, as I said, the proliferation of financing for weapons of mass destruction and small arms, and targeted financial sanctions. And of course, as the Honorable Chair of JLAC mentioned, the issue of mutual legal assistance, making the issue of mutual legal assistance quite easy between countries. Because money laundering, Honorable Speaker, and combating terrorism is a global matter and a global affair, and therefore we need very clear provisions on how we can offer each other's countries around the world mutual legal assistance. So that if you commit a crime, whether it's around terrorism financing, whether it is around the financing of around weapons, or whether it is a money laundering Act, you will know there is no safe haven anywhere in the world. Not in Dubai, not in South Africa, not in the UK, not even in the Cayman Islands, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, because, you know, the Cayman Islands and the British Virgin, all the British Virgin Islands, Honorable Speaker, have for a long time been used, especially by the political class in this country, as safe havens for money looted from Kenyans. The latest being the telecom haste in the last regime. And I must remind the Chair CII and Chair Finance, who are also working on the report on telecom. We need that report board in this house so that we get to know how did people loot a whopping over 6 billion shillings in the last 2 days of the last regime and scatter away all that money to Malaysia, Mauritius, and part of it end up in the Cayman Islands. Honorable Speaker, it is these stolen national assets, public resources that are stolen by people who hold offices in Kenya and elsewhere, Honorable Speaker, that this bill now will seek to ensure that should you steal, even the Cayman Islands, is not safe, will no longer be safe for you. Whether you think you will take your money and cleanse it through what we had, what was called the Pandora Papers. And you've had politicians telling us that in 2 weeks they will offer us information on the Pandora Papers and how they got to get billions, tens of billions, scattered away out of this country to the Cayman Islands and other British Virgin Islands and other safe tax havens in the world. But 3 years after, we have never had that statement from the same politicians to tell us how they got tens of billions invested out there, yet at times we're in positions of leadership where they were asking other people to bring foreign direct investments into this country. And what a contradiction, Honorable Speaker, that as leaders you're asking people to bring foreign direct investments into your country, and at the same time you're extraditing money and you're telling us it is clean money to the Cayman Islands and other tax havens, including those in our neighborhood. I don't want to name names, Honorable Speaker, but we know them, where people have taken money that is suspected to have been stolen. And Honorable Speaker, because we are enacting these laws to make sure that no corner of the world becomes a safe haven for stolen money, for people who are financing terrorism, or people who are financing the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction or small arms that end up killing our people. Honorable Speaker, I want to beg that we all support this bill and ensure that indeed Kenya not only complies with the task force requirements, but is also a safe haven for people who have legitimate and hard-earned money, and our taxes are safe from those who have very sticky fingers to take our money and take it to what they consider to be safe havens using money laundering. With those many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I beg to second.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Honorable members, I now propose the question that the Anti-Money Laundering and Combating of Terrorism Financing Laws Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 35 of 2023 be now read a second time. The Honorable Wilberforce Oundo, member for Funyula.
I don't have. Honorable Speaker, thank you for this opportunity to contribute to the Anti-Money Laundering and Combating of Terrorism Financing Laws Amendment Bill of 2023. Honorable Speaker, when you look at the Memorandum of Objects and Reasons, it clearly seeks to amend various acts of Parliament relating to anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism, and countering the financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, etc. Honorable Speaker, a basic count indicates that about 16 to 17 acts of Parliament that are being amended to align to what the mover has indicated as a result to addressing the issues raised by the peer review. Honorable Speaker, as is always a practice, 17 or 16 acts of parliament being amended at one go in one bill becomes a mouthful, and we have always complained here, it becomes difficult to give thorough review or analysis of the bill that's as it is. But nevertheless, Honorable Speaker, it has already been presented, therefore we must deal with it. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, let's agree, terrorism and financing of terrorism is an essential threat to national security and the well-being of this country. And that's why in the wisdom of the framers, we came up with anti-money laundering, because terrorism and any acts of violence or threat to security of national security essentially depends on financing of those activities. If we are able to cut out financing, the threat posed by terrorism and other crimes will be substantially reduced and will save this country a lot of resources required to protect this country. Honorable Speaker, unfortunately in this country, and as I've always continuously said, we have very many laws, very well thought out laws. We have regulations, we have mechanisms, but we pride in hate speech, we pride in warmongering, we pride in talking PR, but we don't go to the extent of implementing the laws that we have. Honorable Speaker, if you listen to the report, one of the key issues they're raising is that we have the laws, they might have gaps, but we have not implemented or enforced the existing laws. We just hope that whoever is in charge, as they are put in various laws, will go out of their way to deal with this matter. Honorable Speaker, another threat that is emerging, and which I had hoped the amendments will capture, is the issue of illicit financial flows. Illicit financial flows. We seem to have concentrated on basic procedural issues, but we have not given any serious talk or any serious attention to illicit financial flows and tax expenditures, which we need to address. I hope when we go to the committee of the whole House, the respective committees, both JLAC and Finance, will seek further technical support to ensure that we address on these issues. Honorable Speaker, speaking to the bill at hand, it has got very many issues. Of course, the greatest concern, and all of us know, is this what they're talking about, voluntary extradition. Honorable Speaker, when it's voluntary, when it's coerced, when it is forced, when it's obtained under duress, it becomes extremely difficult. We have had so many cases, Honorable Speaker, where people have been abducted in this country and taken out of this country without trace, and they find themselves in hostile territories on the pretext that's voluntary. I had hoped that any form of voluntary consent to extradition should be obtained before either a magistrate or a judge of the High Court, so that it's truly voluntary. Honorable Speaker, we also appreciate the expanding the scope of the Financial Reporting Center so that we are able to track illicit financial flows and cases of laundering money obtained from corruption cases. Honorable Speaker, I would have also hoped that when they are talking about this financial reporting, they must also tell us, many times when we are vetting the cabinet secretaries, we are vetting PSs, they deliberately exaggerated their word. So that by the end of their 5-year term, they'll say my word was this, and that word has been obtained through illegal or corruption means. I'd hoped now we'd go up to this point, that when a public officer comes for vetting, he should be asked, what do you have now? And what you have now, has it been valued and verified by a competent authority, so that the figures you are giving us are not manufactured figures in anticipation that we are going to loot public resources. Honorable Speaker, how do you explain a cabinet secretary who wants 1 million and goes to take a mortgage of 120 million to finance purchase of a house? That's now the kind of things we should be addressing now. Shouldn't we just be looking at foreign money getting out of the country, but money just being acquired through illegal means. Honorable Speaker, the entire bill seems to focus so much on vetting of shareholders, substantial significant shareholders, beneficial owners, and the rest of the things. Honorable Speaker, there is the fear, obviously, that's going to be misused. If you have a beef with anybody, they'll say that they don't trust your source of income or source of capital, so that they will not allow you give you a license for purposes of finding a company or something like that. I would have hoped in the committee stage, where the two committees are making amendments, there must be mechanisms to ensure there is the right of recourse. If you say you are not giving me a license, or you are not giving me permission to proceed, we must be able to deal with that. Honorable Speaker, I find it curious that the Insurance Act has been included in this particular bill, because what is proposed to be amended in the Finance Act, the Insurance Act, other than the issue of vetting of the shareholders and beneficial owners, it all deals with the issue of changing from registration to licensing. I'd have thought that would have been dealt with in the proper manner in dealing with the Insurance Act on its own. Honorable Speaker, now the issue that has also brought, it looks curious, is what they're calling under the amendment being brought, the National Police Service Act, controlled delivery, whereby there is a consignment that is illegal can be allowed to go through the country under the supervision and watch of the police officers. Honorable Speaker, we live in a country where the police service is corrupt to the core, where the police service is populated by people who have got low levels of integrity and accountability. Are we not creating a disaster, a case where even arms, narcotics, or substances that are harmful to the economy or to the country could be diverted? Honorable Speaker, we are even dealing with a case where KRA seals were fixed to a go down, but the following day, KRA seals were intact, but the sugar was gone. So we are really creating a disaster in the making. And more so, Honorable Speaker, with the discordant command structure that we have seen the police service, the National Police Service talking of this, the police command, the IG talking of a different thing, we are truly, Honorable Speaker, creating a crisis, which I would urge the committee and the mover of the bill to literally delete that particular clause as we wait to see how things go. Honorable Speaker, it also provides that all companies, even with shareholding of less than 5 million, must have as a mandatory a company secretary or a contact person who will be providing information. Honorable Speaker, we are imposing undue cost on doing business to small-time businesses. Honorable Speaker, companies have occasionally submitted or filed their returns using probably a company secretary who does not necessarily become who is an employee of the company. Probably so again, as we proceed, we must also look at it, the way how to fix it. Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, we have had so many stories here. The government or the executive has got all the arms, has got all the mechanisms in this country to go after people who have looted this economy. We are tired as people of Kenyan people, every day being told, people looted, people looted. 1 year down the line, how long does it take to investigate and arraign people who have looted? Or is it a smoke screen so that they could also do the same?
The time is over. The Honorable Musa Sirma, member for Eldama Ravine. His name appears on the screen. The Honorable Dido Raso, member for Saku.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this omnibus bill, but I have quite a bit of reservation about this particular bill. Madam Speaker, Kenya is not a rich country. Kenya is, we cannot say we are poor, but we are somewhere in the levels of the world economy. The idea of this bill, the intention is good. The title of this bill is the Anti-Money Laundering and Combating Terrorism Financing. What we don't want this bill to do is to create rafts of bureaucracies so that people don't invest in Kenya. Already the talk out there, people would rather put their money in Tanzania, in Uganda, in Rwanda, for very obvious reason, that there is a lot that we as a country are borrowing from other countries in the West, the very wealthy countries, so that they stem the flow of funds into this country. Madam Speaker, this bill establishes baseline for prudence and financial discipline in the Kenyan financial sector, and also to that extent in the economy. But our worry is how much is the Central Bank of Kenya, that actually the policeman of ensuring there's financial prudence and discipline, how much are they doing in terms of achieving that? The issue of bitcoins is one of such interesting things that have happened in very recent days, that individuals can walk into Kenya, set up shop somewhere, and try to swill so much money through the Kenyan economy. This is one of the things that this bill would provide a safeguard. Madam Speaker, the issue of terrorism cannot fly if, as far as this economy is concerned, people run what you call the sort of proper and the sort of regulated financing into this economy. But there are cases where money is laundered by opening front shops that are just front shops, but a lot of money is plowed through companies or individuals. I see within this bill a foreign limited liability partnership, that a foreign entity wishing to set up a business in Kenya will use our local representatives. I think we must go beyond that to make sure that those individuals are not just individuals by name, but established individuals who have addresses, companies, those who are actually carrying out day-to-day transaction as entities who are involved within the economy, but not individuals who can be used to do nefarious activities. Honorable Speaker, what I also like about this bill is it has attempted to identify what is proliferation. Initially, I think in the previous bill, they did not identify for the users of this particular bill or whatever laws that will come out of this, about the committees and proliferation. I think the proliferation is what will give the police and those who are watchdogs on our economies and the financial sector to actually find that stockpiling a particular material, stockpiling particular nature of goods may involve a criminal activity. Madam Speaker, there's also that new definition of funds. And this is where KJ and his committee comes in, tangible and intangible. We have always looked at people who have buildings, cars, people who can throw around cash, but there's a lot of money that is being transacted virtually. In fact, in billions, much more than what we spend in shops and supermarkets and wherever, in terms of even using smart cards. Madam Speaker, I would have really wished that this bill, as an omnibus, should have contained itself within the frames of anti-money laundering and countering terrorism, as opposed to bringing in something like insurance on board. Finally, for this bill to have an effect, for it to be respected and enacted into the laws of this land, this bill must canvass maximum participation from the stakeholders so that it doesn't happen that it will stem the growth of our economy. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Saku. The Honorable Beatrice Elachi, Member for Dagoretti North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also rise to support the bill, but also to just put in my reservations in some of the proposals, and appreciating that, Madam Speaker, we must always remember that we need goodwill, political goodwill, for you to have an ability to respond to these existing threats. And looking at our country, Kenya, Madam Speaker, you find that many of the times, for the many years that we've had, this country has been a heaven for many people who come from conflict countries, and they will find a way and enter into even our real estate, in our oil companies, and you question how is it within a political crisis a country is able to have their citizens being given an opportunity, Madam Speaker, to invest in Kenya, which is very wrong, Madam Speaker, because at that time you find most of their citizens in camps, they are struggling, but you find a few of them have decided they are the owners of real estate even in this country, Madam Speaker. So as we bring in this bill, I am hoping we are not just looking at those who have trust or anything. We are starting with those who decided to make Kenya a country where they've taken money, dirty money from their country, and decided to invest in this country. Madam Speaker, we also need to look at, and I want to thank the chair and to tell the chair, Chair, you walk into some of these wholesales that we have, and you ask to pay a bill. And you find the owner says, you can't pay with Lipa and M-Pesa. You can only pay by withdrawal. It means that person does not want to really account to this country and does not want to show his or her sales the way. And so you run away from KRA, you run away from everything, and you just keep. And because Kenyans want to buy, they just buy. But it is wrong, Madam Speaker, and there are many of them. all over, especially in my constituency, there are so many. What about if I will think they are also doing money laundering? We have to think of it as you look at it, as you open up for public participation. Also quietly walk in, just see how some of these things function, and you realize we have put our country into a lot of risk. Madam Speaker, the other thing we need to be asking ourselves, even as I speak of the real estates, where people have just put in a lot of money. But then the other thing now, when I'm looking at the bill, Madam Speaker, I want to ask the chair to look at, to rethink, I don't know. When you establish a committee to be known as the Counter-Financing of Terrorism Interministerial Committee, Madam Speaker, why we have not conquered this thing is the moment you put up a whole ministerial committee, and this is a very serious thing. And so you find you have the cabinet responsible of internal, which is okay. Definitely they will send a representative. Then you have a cabinet secretary responsible of matters of finance. They will send a representative. My biggest worry is today you have so-and-so in this committee. The next sitting, the person who was in that committee will not be available, and so you'll have another person coming in to sit in, and you find this is this thing that covers now these departments is what is going to it is the one that is going to kill the spirit of this bill, because that institutional memory, as my brother says, colleague, that you cannot have, and we would either think of an authority, think of something better, but not this team that is going to handle this committee. They will be used, and you can imagine now having this committee, and your enforcement team is also there with a very long list, and so they will blame each other. We will end up in blame game. Instead of now us dealing with real matters of laundry, we will have blame game. Others will be compromised, Madam Speaker. We will still end up with the same challenges we are facing, Madam Speaker. So for me, I want to plead with the committee. Look at your agencies that is you have put in place to enforce, but also look at your committee. You might do very good work with the bill. You might bring us a bill thinking we are dealing with money laundering. We will end up having the same challenges we've been having, where we are compromised. And we know as ourselves, it is something that is hurting this country, that until we come out of that culture of being compromised, we shall be compromised, and this will be the worst for us. But I just want to tell, now that the majority leader is back, that this is issue of foundations. Some of us have run foundations for many years, Madam Speaker. This matter of saying that we can loot money and put in, that we take two, I think my majority leader must visit my children's home in Ngong and look at how a children's home is run and sustained without having government money. And 58 have gone to campus, and many others. And it's a school. It's a home and a school. So for me, naming members of parliament who have foundations, I think that one, it will be very unfair. It's good to go and see the work they are doing, and I know there are many. We have those who have education funds. So do you want to tell us, within the education funds, some people have put in illicit financing or what? So it will be very important, even as we look at the bill, let us look at some of the clauses that are very critical, that can affect some of the sectors and work around. But I know, Madam Speaker, this is one bill that we need for the country. We need to look at not just that. We have many other things that people do, Madam Speaker, especially in the oil sector, in the gas sector. That is where money laundering is done very seriously. So let us not just run away. We can name, but let us also be very cautious as we do it. For me, I wish, and I'm hoping the chair is listening, that the committee will let this house down. We need to rethink and reorganize it in a better way so that it can work. With those many and few remarks, Madam Speaker, I want to really support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Beatrice. The Honorable John Waweru, member for Dagoretti North.
Madam Speaker,
member for Dagoretti South.
Madam Speaker, the confusion can be excused because my neighbor has just ceded the floor and it is becoming a Dagoretti affair, and we actually see ourselves as one larger Dagoretti. So I do not get offended when I'm called a member of Dagoretti North, neither does she get offended when she is referred to as member of Dagoretti South. Madam Speaker, this is real business that we are transacting this afternoon in this house. Madam Speaker, presented here very ably and very eloquently by the Chairman Jailak, is a raft of amendments that will see a drastic shift in how we attend to matters that have to do with fraud. And Madam Speaker, at times we refer to fraud and give it some fancy names. We call it very big English names. But thuggery is thuggery, Madam Speaker. Theft is theft, and crime is crime. Here we are attending to matters that seek to mitigate on issues that lead to criminal activities, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I go into the heart of this motion, I'd like to say that I support. And secondly, I would want to preliminarily say that I had the honor of recently visiting a country in the name of South Korea. Madam Speaker, the city I visited is not the biggest or the second biggest or third biggest. It is actually the 10th biggest city in South Korea. But when you look at the infrastructure, when you look at the governance, when you look at the development, I can tell you, Madam Speaker,
Red Bull gives you wings.
10th largest city in South Korea. A country that we are told we were at par with in the 60s. And I acknowledge the change of guard, and I would wish to take the opportunity to welcome Mr. Speaker so that I do not confuse myself and call him Madam Speaker. That would be sacrilegious. Mr. Speaker, I was saying that the city I visited was actually not the biggest city, neither was it the third or fourth biggest city. It was the 10th biggest city. However, the development, the governance, the infrastructure in that 10th largest city is not comparable to any city in East and Central Africa. Where did we go wrong, Mr. Speaker? If in the 60s we were at par with South Korea, Mr. Speaker, at the end of my trip, I said to myself that the biggest difference between Kenya and South Korea today is not the brick and mortar issues, is not the laws that they make. It is actually the soft issues that we never attend to, Mr. Speaker. The soft issues of discipline, the soft issues of honesty, the soft issues of integrity, and the soft issues of meritocracy. Mr. Speaker, the patriotism in such countries is admirable. So even as we are attending to the hard laws, we've got to also ask ourselves, what are we doing to attend to the soft issues in this country? What are we doing to encourage patriotism? What are we doing to encourage honesty? What are we doing to encourage meritocracy, Mr. Speaker? Even as we are making such big laws, what are we doing to encourage honesty? What are we doing to encourage meritocracy, Mr. Speaker? Even as we are to encourage patriotism, big laws, what are we doing to encourage world countries? Mr. Speaker, I support this bill because I see us taking a step towards remedying some of the mischief that we are attending to as a house presently. Mr. Speaker, there is a matter that yourself and myself shall have to interrogate, the matter of the world coin. It is alive It is present and it is pressing. Kenyans lining up in their thousands to have their eyes scanned with an orb that no one, no committee in this house can tell you what is carried in that orb. No one knows what the medical implications would be after that scan. Mr. Speaker, we do not know what the connection is between the scan of the iris and the cryptocurrency inducement that is being given to Kenyans. We do not even understand how a foreign company that is registered maybe somewhere in the US, we are seeing registration somewhere in Germany, and then it is also got representation from the United States of America, how such a company ended up being able to defy orders to seize their operations, orders granted by the office that is given the powers to seize such activities, the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, totally disregarded. They went ahead and booked an office somewhere in the KICC and started out operations. These are the matters that we seek to attend to by changing the raft of laws that have been listed here by the chairman. Mr. Speaker, the committee that I chair, the Committee on Communication, Information and Innovation, has a live matter in front of it. A matter that has to do with monies that were transacted in the dying minutes of the last